This week on the Geek, the Nerd, and the Tangent, Eric is missing, and we talk about the epic fantasy novel series Mistborn. Welcome to the Geek, the Nerd, and the Tangent. Again, I am Brett.
And I am Matt.
And today we're down one man. Eric's not here.
I'm sure we'll still have plenty of tangents without him.
Yeah,
we usually do.
We're going to go off on tangents, but we're excited today to talk about the Mistborn series. But before we get into that, we're going to round up some randomness.
It's time for the Random Roundup.
All right, Matt. We have some, where do you want to start? Do we want to start with some listener feedback? Or
Oh, sure. Yeah, we could do that. We can also start. Yeah, let's start with the listener feedback from Logan. So, Logan Hendricks, our friend, messaged us something, kind of a take on the adaptations, which I think was interesting. I wanted to highlight a couple of the things that he said. He's talking about adaptations. One thing he mentioned was a series of unfortunate events, movie/Netflix series, which is something my sister actually mentioned as well. And I have not read or seen the Netflix series. I saw the movie a long time ago with Jim Carrey, but
same thing with me.
I forgot completely about it.
I just remember he impersonates dinosaur one point, and it's really funny, and that's all I remember. Just Jim Carrey's physical humor.
Yeah. Jim Carrey was a physically humorous genius, I think. The other thing that he mentions is, for that he mentioned that he was pretty favorable with the Netflix adaptation because it could explore the depth of the books a little bit better. Mm-hmm. For the other one he was interested in, one that we mentioned and we said we weren't sure there could be an adaptation, which thinking about it, I don't necessarily agree. Because I always think there's a mind out there that can do something special with something that you didn't expect. But you have to find that right person, and it can't just be someone that's already known usually, because you know what they're capable of. But anyway, that was my thought. But he said that he thought it would be, let me just quote him. He said, "I would have wished to see an Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow produced in a TV/Netflix series instead of a movie." So he may not have been the biggest fan of the Ender's Game movie. I thought it was a good B movie. I enjoyed it.
If for what it was, I was like, well, this gets across the main beats of the story.
Yep.
It introduces, you get fan favorite. What's the word I'm looking for?
Fan service?
Fan service for just, it shows the characters. You do Beans in it, whether he's not really important, but
right.
I mean, he gets the crew together. You have those people and they all do their thing.
Yes, that is true. And it wasn't a bad adaptation, and Harrison Ford was there to sell some tickets. So it worked out okay. But so his take on this, he said, especially if you incorporated the events of Ender's Shadow series at the same time, the different battles in the arena you could cover. You could cover Bean as a potential successor for Ender if he fails. You could cover the intrigue of what Bean is doing behind the scenes in developing a dragon army. We've got a dog going crazy here, so I'll put him upstairs in a minute. The growth Ender goes through in the game. The age and character growth Ender goes through during the years of Battle School, and Peter and Valentine publishing content on the net. So there's a lot of things that they could cover and go more into depth and have more of an in-depth story to be told in a Netflix/TV story. So
that would be really great. There's just one, I think with all the Ender's books and all the Ender's Shadows books or whatever, there's a whole bunch of content that would be great for a TV series. The problem is when you're casting kids.
Yeah.
How do you do something like that? I think that's one thing is the kids are so small to adapt that novel exactly like the way you're reading it or whatever, especially the Bean series and stuff to intertwine with the Ender stuff would be extremely hard, but it would be awesome. that's why a comic, they did do some comic book stuff for Ender's Game one. Like there's been an adaptation. Marvel did an adaptation of it, but a cartoon or an animated show where you can have growth of the characters maybe would be an option for a format for an adaptation of Ender's Game to be as close to what you want it to be, with all that interplay with all the characters and all the parallel storylines that then converge and stuff like that. It could be quite fascinating, but like live action is, I just see limitations until we figure out technology that can even help us with that. An adaptation is limited for Ender's Game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've only read the first book, so I don't know all the details of the following books in the series.
Well, the following books in the series that I've read are some of the books where he's an adult, because you jump to if you read it like the series as it was being published or whatever, it jumps to an adult version, which actually those books are very different in a way, because it's not the same thing, but they're good in their own way. You just have to read Ender's Game as a foundation and then read those, but don't expect it to be young Ender or whatever, because it's an adult Ender in the future. He's, been traveling at high speed, so he's, at light speed, so he's gone into the future. So then you have this whole interesting galactic scale type story rather than something that's more just like earthbound.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there. Thank you, Logan, for sharing that with us. I think that those are some good points, some interesting insight there to that book series that you probably have more insight into than any of us do. So we definitely appreciate that. We also have from our very own Eric,
Mr.
We
Mueller
have a
himself.
voicemail to play from him. So we'll go ahead and do that now. It's about 2.5 minutes, so I know that's kind of a long time for a voicemail recording.
But this is Eric, and he's just going to blabber on for a while.
Stick with us, and we'll get to Mistborn in a minute. And after we do this, I'm going to share something about the Star Wars movies that are upcoming and kind of Disney's approach to that. And we'll go from there. We'll get to Mistborn. But let's go ahead and play Eric's voicemail.
Hola! Hello, everybody out in Radio Land. It is I, your favorite co-host and creative partner of the Geek, the Nerd, and the Tangent, Eric Mueller. Dun 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 dun! Sorry I can't be on the show today. I really regret that. But it's okay. Because sometimes you just gotta do things that are out of your hands. Actually, my parents have been away for 2 years on a church-serving mission, and they're finally coming back. So I'm going to be seeing them at the airport. So here's the thoughts I've had for the week. People think nerds, geeks, all these lazy bums who live in their mom and dad's basements. Well, we need to rise up and become better and put on a Fitbit and go walking. That's what I've been doing this week. I got myself a Fitbit. Actually, I had it for a while, but I've actually went outside and walked and tried to walk my 10,000 steps a day. It's not an easy task, but it's a challenge for all of you folks out there to get up, exercise, try and take care of your body a little bit better. I don't do it as well as I should. Like today, I snarfed myself with Arby's. But I did get some salad at Costco. So get up and just do some walking and prove to the world that us geeks and nerds can be as strong as a jock or a wrestler or Mike Tyson, even though we've all beat him at Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. So those are my thoughts. Hope you all enjoy the rest of the show. And thank you, Brett and Matt. Thank you for all you do. And remember, Be kind to each other, in the words of Bill and Ted's. Be excellent to each other, and party on, dudes. And we'll see you, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, Eric.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Now, did you say that there was Bill and Ted's, like multiple Teds?
Bill and Ted.
And that-
Maybe that's a spoiler for this next movie.
And that, multiple Teds.
Time traveling Ted all over the place.
Technically, the sequel, Bogus Journey, had like the evil twins or whatever, the evil. So that was like multiple Teds. But then it would be Bills and Teds. But yeah, G&T cares.
Indeed. All right. Well, thanks for sharing, Eric. We hope your parents get home safely and you have a great reunion with them. It'll be fun to have them back around. They're nice folks. I wanted to share something about the Star Wars news lately.
Because there was headlines that were conflicting. Now, I didn't go deep into them where it's like, oh, they're going to hold back on it. But yet, there was still a Boba Fett movie. Wasn't that basically announced?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that were announced, and there's been some confusing reaction to the Solo movie that didn't do very well financially.
Losing $50 million or something like that.
Yeah. It's losing some money, and obviously that's a big deal for Lucasfilm. They're not used to
Losing
any money to things. And I think there's a lot of Last Jedi people that really think that it was them that are behind this and that somehow they managed to make this happen. But that is the biggest bunch of nonsense I've ever heard.
Is that what, like...
Yeah, they think because they hated The Last Jedi so much that they boycotted this movie because they don't like the direction Star Wars is taking. So it was them that caused $50 million loss. That's
the internet's a strange place.
It's a horrible place too. But honestly,
we're grateful that you're listening to us on the internet.
It's true. Internet could be good or bad. But I come from the camp of really enjoying The Last Jedi and admiring it for the writing. I somewhat relate to Luke in that state, kind of looking back on life and that sort of thing.
And that part's actually my favorite part of The Last Jedi. I just have issues with the treatment of Finn and Poe's characters. I feel like they made them I didn't like them as much in this one. And then I can't get past the whole like what's her name? The
Rose?
Admiral. Rose.
Admiral Holdo.
Oh, Admiral Holdo bugs me for some reason because I just felt like they try to set up Poe as a hotshot pilot who's just going to be a loose cannon and just do whatever he wants or whatever. And I didn't totally feel that from Poe as a character building off The Force Awakens. And so when they don't fill him in on anything, I'm like,
why?
Why?
And why not just tell him and avoid this whole catastrophe?
And so there's just and then the slow speed chase. If the First Order is going to be taking over the galaxy in 2 weeks or whatever, Rey tells Luke, couldn't they just bring in people to intercept? Like they have interstellar communication. Mm-hmm. Can they just intercept them and blow the rebels out of the sky or whatever? The slow speed chase just bugged me from the beginning.
It was a little strange. I think there are some things that are flawed as far as the logic of how things played out. With Poe was the one that bugged me the most because not only is he belligerent, and yeah, sure, they could have just. That's such a problem with every movie is no one talks to each other. Like if people would just explain what's happening to somebody, it would just solve so many problems. And if Admiral Holdo would just explain to Poe what was going on, he would have understood completely. It was a pretty good plan. I mean, under the fictitious circumstances that existed.
Yeah.
But here's my issue with Poe is under the circumstances, he completely went against his upper authority and he did this plan. And because of his plan, the great majority of the resistance was killed. Whereas they probably would have made it out okay if it wasn't for his plan.
You would have had some help there. I mean, because in the end, Rey involves Luke, brings him in an interesting sense, not literally there apparently, but yet has the Luke story. How that converges with Rey there is actually not that bad. I'm all for the Rey and Luke story. Rey with insignificant parents is fine to me and stuff like that. I think I've mentioned that before. So yeah, there's some issue. I think the movie scene by scene directed great, and I know I've mentioned that before. How there's aspects of the movie that I really really love, but then there's things that just really bug me. So
That's fair. And I think with Poe in a realistic military environment, he would have been
court-martialed.
Yeah, he would have been put to death probably for what he did.
It was
know?
like, yeah, there's.
It was out of hand. It was out of control. For some reason, at the end, Admiral Holdo was like to Leia, and she was like, "I like him." She wouldn't like him. He's an idiot.
Yeah.
He's a complete idiot. And he got the majority of what was left of the Resistance killed because of what he did. And I think at the end of the movie, it's just like, well, I learned a good lesson.
And there's
good, but you killed everyone.
And they're supposed to be setting him up, it seems like, for, the next Leia type character, someone who's involved with, I don't know, being one of the leaders of the newly formed Rebel Alliance.
But in reality, he should be prosecuted for treason, basically.
But they could have just filled him in on it.
Yeah.
And
they could have, but his response to them was treasonous, and it should have been treated as such. But I agree, they should have just told the guy, like, this is what's going on.
And that's where the story just breaks down for me, where it's like they were just trying to find things for those characters to do while the Luke and Rey stuff was going on. I don't know. It was
right, but perhaps if they had done something a little different, not a chase scene, they could have done it a little bit differently, where their stories could have made more sense. And so I agree with some of these things. I don't agree that The Last Jedi was just a complete failure. I don't agree that Luke was not the direction it should have gone. I like the direction they took with Luke. I think it's realistic. I think he's having a faith crisis, and that's normal for people to have.
And he's following the examples of the only Jedi he's known.
Right, yeah, and he's just doing the best that he can. I mean, he shut himself off from the Force, but he's having a tough time in life. He's realizing that this Jedi Order that he belonged to was very arrogant in the way that they used to do things, and was very they did things incorrectly in a lot of ways, and he didn't appreciate that.
They were totally going off, like he says, hubris. They were totally full of pride. They thought that they were the best around, and that they were untouchable by anything evil, and they were doing that they were doing what's right, but they weren't really listening to the Force.
And yeah, if you watch the prequels, the Jedi Council is so annoying. They are so annoying.
And they're meant to be there because they're part of the whole plot that destroys the Republic. And they're pawns, and they are just too stupid to realize because of their pride.
All right, we got off on a Last Jedi tangent, but anyway, the basically the news here I'm getting from Star Wars Newsnet, which is known to be a fairly credible source with some inside knowledge to things.
They have some connections.
One of the quotes from it sounds like this. What they said was an insider talking to THR mentioned that they haven't slowed down development, but they are licking their wounds over Solo. It doesn't mean those spin-offs don't happen. It just means they're trying to figure out how to make and market them differently.
It's just the regrouping business.
Yeah, they're just regrouping. They're not calling it off. Of course they're not. These are money makers, potentially.
And in the end, Solo's going to make money because
hopefully, you've got all sorts of things. Yeah.
All of the people streaming it and everything. They're going to get money through other forms of distribution post theatrical.
It's true. Yeah.
Stuff. So and then in the end, sometimes people double back to these things, and then they end up being like fan favorites for some reason,
Yeah, and I don't think Solo was as bad as everyone's giving it.
L3 is the only thing that bugged me. So,
yeah, she was a little uncomfortable. But I just want to say at this state, so that's basically what the news is they're just regrouping, they're figuring things out. I want to give, because I know Kathleen Kennedy listens to this show faithfully.
Yeah.
So I just got to give her
I
some
get a phone call.
a
right after we're done with the
suggestion
show.
here that they approach Lucasfilm a little bit differently. So what they've been doing is pretty much giving creative control to one director. And I'm not saying there's no collaboration at all, but if you go to Pixar and you see how they do things there, I love it because it's such a collaborative thing where
Or even if you go to Marvel, Marvel has at least one person who's kind of guiding the whole thing.
Right.
Kevin Feige.
right.
So
And at Pixar you have you've got the person that's they have control of the movie basically. So Brad Bird, for example, Incredibles 2 director and creator, and Incredibles 1 as well. But when they're going through the storytelling process and the story making process and creating the characters and seeing where they're going, they always collaborate. They get into rooms together and they say, this is where we're at. People shout out ideas. People are always giving ideas and saying, oh, what about this? Or this doesn't make sense. They're poking holes in the plot. They're poking holes in the characters. They're making, they're helping the director who may have been blind to some things to see things differently. If you read the book Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull, I know I mentioned that book a lot. Go read the book, and it shows such a good management style, and it shows exactly why Pixar, time and time again, has successes.
and I think they give themselves time.
They give themselves so much time. Yeah,
Because in order to do that, you have to give yourself time because you start derailing your project with new ideas sometimes. You have to plan for that.
it's true.
And so, like, these Star Wars movies, they just start busting them out.
Yeah, they're cranking them out a year for one of these movies. Like, no, even the prequels took longer than that.
Yeah, and George, yeah. He was on a rush schedule for his own management style even
was.
then. So
Right. So I guess my suggestion is like slow down on these movies. I'm not saying like don't do anything, but just slow down. Do one of the movies that you know is going to be a moneymaker. And in the meantime, take it 2, 3, 4, 5 years on a movie. Take some time on these things.
it should be an every other year, every 3-year thing that we're seeing a Star Wars movie. They need to get on. I do think a TV series, if they want to keep like Star Wars on people's minds,
Right.
That's part of this marketing strategy. Let's get this. They need to get that TV series running, and hopefully it'd be good because then that keeps Star Wars on people's minds, the animated series and stuff like that. And then and especially with the animated series is a good thing because kids grow up and they grow up faster than we realize.
Oh, yeah.
So like by the time a movie comes out, they might be older and appreciate it differently and be able to spend the money
Yeah.
on the movie. So
It's true. I will say, though, that Pixar puts out a movie a year, but they're still spending time on these movies. They just schedule it such that, Coco that they spent 4 or 5 years on or whatever, however long,
They have like
happens
a
to come out this year, and then Incredibles 2 they spent 4 or 5 years on or however long comes out the next year, right?
Yeah.
So they've got things paced as such that they're spending enough time on the movies, but they're still releasing consistently year by year.
yeah. Well, I read this was long ago. Maybe things have changed, but I read somewhere where there was like a 4-year cycle. Like for each movie was like taking 4 years. So the planning, and then with animation, that's usually how things actually happen. Like they give themselves time because you have to animate the thing. So
Yeah. That's very true. But I love that they're taking time on the story creating process. Even at the beginning of Incredibles 2, there's some comments from the cast and filmmakers, and they say that it took them so long, even before they were animating, they were spending so much time on just the story, like a lot of time.
Good,
That's
'cause
what Star Wars needs
I
to
haven't
do.
seen The Incredibles 2, but the way that the movie left you with a possibility of a million different directions because that story was done.
You got to see it, man. It's good.
All right. Well, I will.
Yeah. Anyway, those are just some thoughts. I think if they took that approach, I think they would be doing a lot better collaboratively, and I think it would show in the box office.
All right. Let's segue. So leave us comments about Star Wars and what you guys think. Let's segue into Mistborn. Are you ready, Matt?
Yeah, let's do this. I'm excited to talk about Mistborn.
Okay, so for those of you, we assume that a lot of you know what Mistborn is. It's a novel series by Brandon Sanderson.
It's part of his overall 36-book arc.
Well, he has all these different book series, and they seemingly are unrelated, but they're actually all related in his bigger universe. So you could say there's a whole bunch of planets with fantasy novels happening on them, and he's got some sort of thing that's linking them all together.
Exactly.
He is always writing. He's publishing books all the time. I don't know.
He's just always writing. This guy is out of control.
It's amazing, and the key thing to Brandon Sanderson books that I have noticed, and I have really only read Mistborn and like Warbreaker.
Well, you read
What else did I read?
the other Mistborn. I mean, they're Mistborn books. It's like the 4, 5, and 6. They're technically called a Mistborn novel. I'm trying to think. So they take place more in like the
It's like the early 1900s type thing.
Yeah, Industrial Revolution.
Somewhat steampunkish, somewhat. It has a unique setting that actually that's where I started the series. Which
Oh, really?
I don't know if I recommend that, but so in
No,
general,
I don't recommend that at all.
So, but
Start with Mistborn.
start with Mistborn, or it's called The Final Empire. That's the first book.
Which is confusing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
When I was looking these up, I was confused by that title.
Yeah, so Mistborn / The Final Empire is the first book. It introduces you to the setting and the main characters. You have now, like in this story, you have the magic people who how do we explain this to someone who's never
Oh,
never read it,
they're basically a magic system that's somewhat. It's not real science, but it's kind of scientifically explained in the book.
So there's limitations, and this is what Brandon Sanderson does. He thinks out his magic system, so it isn't like just some wizard can call down fire from heaven and drag, all this weird stuff where just not to say that like Tolkien did anything bad, but you don't even know the limits of Gandalf's power.
Right.
You don't know.
You don't ever explore that.
Yeah.
You kind of don't in Harry Potter as well.
You don't even know how they get their power. They don't. There's no.
Or why saying these spells does anything.
Yeah.
Or how people invent spells or anything like that. You only know that some are more powerful, some are less powerful.
Yeah.
That's all you know.
And so in Mistborn, in the introduction in the first book, you get introduced to allomancers. And those are the magic people that can ingest metal, and then because of the metal they ingest, essentially can do a certain power.
Right. Based on which metal they take in.
Yeah, and then there's various versions. There are the Mistings who can only do one power, and then there are the rare Mistborn who can do all the powers, burn every metal, and get all access to all the powers.
And let me just stop you there for 1 second. We're going to do spoiler free for a minute. So hang with us. We'll let you know when we get into spoiler territory so you can still hear what we have to say if you haven't read these books yet.
Yeah, so we're giving you the introduction right now for those, and then when we get into spoiler territory, we'll let you know you can turn it off, go read the novel, and come back.
Yeah. After a couple months of work.
After a couple months of work, because you probably have to read at least the first 3 to get there. So then there's the Lord Ruler, who was defeated how to explain this, but the Lord Ruler is who runs everything, and he's a tyrant, and he's been living for 1,000 years.
Basically immortal.
An immortal guy. And there's the nobles who are supposed to be people who are their ancestors were friendly to the Lord Ruler. Mm-hmm. And then there is his
and they're kind of like the capital city in the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
A little bit like that.
Yeah.
Where they're really above the rest of the people and they think highly of themselves and they almost don't even think of the other people as human.
Yeah, and then there's the Ska, who are their ancestors were people who weren't friendly to the Lord Ruler, and they're basically slaves.
Yeah.
And in fact, there are slaves. Mm-hmm. In the main city, they're just like totally, Yeah, they're slaves. And then there's the other part of the his organization, in that he has like a secret police. He has, and they have powers,
And they're
stuff
like
that.
they're a religious organization too. It's like a religion basically.
The Canton of Inquisition.
Yeah, the Canton of Inquisition. So they're kind of like priests. You know, you could think of them as priests, but they're also like these inquisitor type of people.
Yeah.
Which I wonder where the original idea for inquisitors came from. Because Star Wars has the inquisitors. There's inquisitors in this. You know that.
Well,
I wonder
there was like the Nazis had the SS. And then there was the Spanish Inquisition. I don't know. It's just like the Romans had, the Praetorian Guard, like where you have your military organization that's under the direct control, sometimes military intelligence, under the direct control of whoever the supreme dictator is.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is just has been in lots of tyrant governments and totalitarian governments and stuff, where they have those people who can go out there and do all the nasty, dirty, gross stuff.
Yeah, I think so. Some main characters for this, we're introduced to a man named Kelsier, who basically discovers he's a Mistborn at one point and starts to create this rebellion against the Lord Ruler. We are also introduced to Vin, who is
the main character.
She's the main character, right? Kelsier is kind of a secondary, but also very main character. He's kind of the mentor, trainer.
You'll find that the book is loaded with characters.
It is. There's a lot going on. But Vin is really the main character that we're always following. And we are introduced to her. She's a ska, so she's one of the lowly... she's often referred to as a street urchin. And she doesn't really know or understand that she has powers. She understands a little bit, and she knows she has some sort of ability to affect people's emotions. And so she's used by her, I believe it's her brother, to do some different things. And then she's discovered by Kelsier, and it goes on from there.
And there was a crew that she was a part of, this abusive guy.
Right. I thought that was her brother.
She's working in the underworld. No, her brother is dead before the start, and her brother's always talking in her mind to her.
I thought that was him, but okay, I don't know.
But then there's the crew leader. I can't remember his name, that was beating her at the beginning of the book, and then Kelsier, basically puts him in his place. So
comes to the rescue.
So that's kind of the beginning of the book, and you see things through Vin's perspective. So as she's getting introduced to all the Allomancy, the Allomancer powers and stuff, you get to go along on that ride. So then you understand all the rules and stuff like that, which makes it so, and it just keeps getting, there's a bigger world around every corner.
Yeah.
As things just keep getting bigger and bigger in this series, and it's just so fun.
Yeah. You explore other different but related magic systems as you go through the books. So each book of the series kind of introduces you to a new part of this magic system that has to do with metals. And, you get introduced to that one by one. It's a new concept, new thing. You get glimpses of it in the other books, but then it's really introduced to you more on a deeper level in the following book.
Yeah. So check this out. I think we're ready to move into spoiler territory.
I think so. But let me just say, before we do that, it's worth a read. I don't care about fantasy that much, to be honest. Like, I've read Harry Potter, I've read The Lord of the Rings, which I enjoyed a lot, but I don't get into fantasy that much. I don't always buy into it. I would
say Star Wars is fantasy.
I mean, Star Wars is sci-fi fantasy, but I do like Star Wars. But as a general rule, I don't go into these novels that are just as thick as a brick and just get into them all the time, like hard. A lot of people do.
Well, and because he has, those thick fantasy novels. These books are fairly thick, but they move fast. And listen to them on audiobook if you have to, because they're good.
The narrator is excellent. In fact, I think it's Brandon Mole who wrote the Fablehaven series. They did an interview together, and
With Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah.
The two Brandons.
The two
that
Brandons.
happen to live in Utah and write fantasy
Right,
novels.
right. But he made a joke about Brandon Sanderson that his goal is to make a book as thick as it is tall, basically. So that's the kind of writer that Brandon Sanderson is. So
Prolific. Oh, man.
Yeah, prolific. So don't expect to get into this and be this light. I mean, not that it's not heavy reading, but it's going to take a little bit of time, especially if you're reading it. So just be aware of that. But it's worth a read. I promise you it has a great payoff. So just go read it and enjoy.
So there's the first 3 books, and then
Stick with those at first and see if you like them.
there's a book called Alloy of Law, which transitions into the new time period of the same world. It's just a different time period.
Exactly.
And then he plans on other time periods too. But Alloy of Law is actually the one that I started out with, and that one's shorter and easy. Like, it was interesting. I thought it was interesting because I could read it and follow it, and then I'm like, oh, what's this backstory? They keep talking about this stuff, and then as soon as I start reading the other novels, I'm like, oh, this character's that, and this. Oh wow, this is really good.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love how it all connects. I've always loved writing that connects together, and there's payoffs from things you read in the first book. There's payoffs later. I love that so much. That a writer knows enough what they're doing with the story that they can have payoffs from these little things that they inserted here and there in the books. Love it.
It's good stuff.
So he does a good job. Go read them. Let's get into spoiler territory.
Spoiler territory. Okay, we're gonna dive deep. What? Let's see. So we've talked about all kinds of different things. I'm just looking through my notes here. What do you think about the 3 different magic systems? So allomancy, feruchemy, and hemalurgy.
Right. So I love that he continues to expand, because I think you could get a little bit bored just with the possibilities of one metal system. But the fact that you're continuing to see, okay, it's not just this, there's more to it than that. And the fact that there's at least two metal systems that we learn about in the first book is kind of the key to how the Lord Ruler is continuously living, right? And he's immortal, essentially, with the way he's doing things.
Because being that mixing feruchemy with Mistborn powers.
Allomancy, yeah.
Allomancy, and especially if you have all the powers, you can have this synergy going on between the magics that allows you to live forever.
Right. So if you remember with feruchemy, you're not getting your power from metals. You are using your own body to store different energies within
in
these
a metal
metals
that's attached to you.
So like if you are going to store health, you need to be sick for a while and store up health within the metal, right? So he's able to, I guess, for lack of a better word, exacerbate that process by combining the feruchemy with allomancy, right? So he uses metals to be able to draw on them to soak into these other metals to bring those powers to be. So he's basically creates an immortal existence
And
that way.
You could get into it pretty deep because there's all the allomantic powers because all the metals, the allomantic metals, and what powers they do. And if you're a Mistborn, you have access to all of them. And then the feruchemists,
As long as you know about them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then there's like the 11th metal and just
In the first book, and then it's like they keep finding more, and next ones,
and it gets interesting. And then then you bring hemalurgy on top of that, which is one of the more confusing things, because hemalurgy is actually how they create the koloss also, and that's and I'm not even sure I totally understand the whole process of that, in that you have to like kill someone on top, like pierce metal through someone into yourself and then break the metal off or leave. I don't know. Hemalurgy was always when that was explained, and then you start to understand how the what are they called? The Inquisitor guys that have the spikes in their eyes.
Yeah. Inquisitors.
Inquisitors, they are able to see with, essentially he thought this through from the beginning, in that he had those.
Oh yeah.
He knew, okay, allomancy, feruchemy, because you have Sacid. He doesn't tell you that Sacid's a feruchemist at the beginning, and so all the magic systems are actually there.
Oh yeah,
from the beginning.
That's the thing I love about these books.
It wasn't just like, oh, I'm pulling another magic system out.
Yeah.
They were there from the beginning. It's all
part of this cohesive story that I love so much. That's why I love it. If he had just been pulling this out of his hat, it wouldn't have been nearly as good, right?
Yeah.
But because there's seeds of it there from the beginning, that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it more profound, I think.
So you have this world on top of like the fact that Vin is such a likable character. You feel for her. She's like totally abused and going into her mind and how she's got a heart of gold. She wants to do the right thing, but she has like, oh man. And then like the Koloss and the Khandra and all this depth to it. Oh man, I just am like,
right.
I haven't talked to someone about it in a while. But
I've actually
like,
never had a conversation with someone that's read these books yet.
It's like this massive world, but yet he focuses it down on Vin.
Right.
And you go on this great ride, and what she's learning, it's like, I don't know. Oh man, I just don't have
he
words.
Focuses
it's so
on.
Good.
I love though that he focuses on Vin, and we're in spoiler territory, so we can go into this. But that revelation of who the actual hero of Ages is at the end. Yeah. Oh man, that is so good because it's more unsuspecting, And I hesitate to give that one away as much because I know there are people that read or listen to spoiler things, but they haven't. You got to just experience the book. I'm not going to give that away, but it was such a fun revelation at the end.
Well, and the religious aspect of the novels is interesting too, because there's like crisis of faith.
Oh yeah,
and there's
particularly in the third one with Sazed, right?
Sazed, and if you read on to the next novel, well, if you read at the end, you know how Sazed brings the powers of ruin and preservation together in himself, and then he becomes harmony, and that is important for the next books when you get into the Wax and Wane series.
Right.
So, Matt, you need to read Alloy of Law.
I have actually read it. I read
did?
Alloy of Law. I started reading the second one as well.
Okay,
I never
because
finished
the Alloy
it
of Law
because
is a transitional one. Because then when you get into the second one, it has an interesting story, and then when you get into the third one, because there's a fourth one planned after that.
Oh, really?
All of that setting you up for that third novel, which is called, what's that one called? Because you have Alloy of Law, Shadows of Self, and what was that? I can't believe I can't remember.
That's all good.
but that one has that introduces even more new magic stuff that you could to get into.
Huh. Because I feel like they introduced a little bit more or at least more metals or something in the Alloy of Law, where he's able to you can either stop time or speed up time. Or
well, what he's doing is he's using ferrochemy, because when you move past the initial things and you go into the Wax and Wane series, the world's been changed. It's no longer the red planet, ashy planet. It's place. A nice, except that they have
pretty much equivalent to what we live in now.
Yeah, kind of a thing. So, or the equivalents of the 1908 in New York, or whatever kind of a thing.
But the Earth is like the Earth that we have now.
Yeah. So So but there's no one who is Allomancer who has all the powers, and there's
like a Mistborn.
There's no Mistborn. There's Mistings, but then there's Twinborn. There's Mistings, and there's ferrochemists who have access to one ferrochemy power, and there's Mistings who have still access to one, and then there's the Twinborn who have access to one Mistborn power and one ferrochemy power, which Wax and Wane are both Twinborn. Mm-hmm. And so, like for Wax, he's what's the word? A coin shot.
Yeah.
He's a coin shot, and he also can increase and decrease his weight through ferrochemy. Right. So in that sense, he uses a synergistic thing between the two so that he can launch himself super high in the air, and then he can fall down and just like crash through stuff because he's all of a sudden increased his weight, and he can make himself heavier to push someone away, because you know how when you're a coin shot, how much you weigh versus what you're pushing on,
it matters. Yeah.
Matters. So
physics. Yeah.
So physics within magic.
Yeah. Physics within this world.
This is how Brandon Sanderson thinks through his magic.
Yeah.
Like there's all kinds of rules, and so like with Wayne, he can store health and stuff like that, but he has the ability to do speed bubbles, which I can't remember what metal that is that he ingests that, but he can stop time within he
doesn't stop time. He speeds up time for everyone else, and it's kind of slows down for them, right?
Yeah. So he can essentially have super speed, and he can pull people into a bubble of super speed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
it's interesting. I really enjoyed the Mistborn books. I enjoyed them a lot more than the Alloy of Law books so far. Yeah. I haven't got into them as much, but
I read those. I read those first, which I don't necessarily recommend. But Wax and Wayne, for me, are characters that fit the way I like.
Did you listen or read to them?
I listened to them.
Because why is he Australian?
You know,
I don't really understand that.
He does use some words that don't seem like, you think that they'd give them all Western accents, because in the Alloy of Law, there's a very Western, like, Cowboys type Western type of
which Australia has some of that feel as well. But
and I think, and maybe that was direction from Brandon Sanderson, because some of the words he uses are not words that you would hear from.
Right. They're Australian words. Yeah.
So maybe that's his idea of someone who's born in the roughs, which is like the Wild West version of in Mistborn. So yeah, I thought the same thing.
It was just weird, but
yeah,
that's a tangent. Back to just the Mistborn novels themselves. What did you think of the overall character development of? I mean, there's a lot of characters to go over, but I guess in general, what did you think of the character development?
It's really good. Well, it's really good. Really gooder than other things. The evolution of Vin. How to explain this? She goes through so many different phases that her growth is so gradual that before you know it, she's the hero of ages. So, like in the 3 novels or whatever, because when she starts out, you're like, she doubts herself. It's that classical story, but she's going to, but she has so much power, and from her inner thoughts that she's tenacious. There's a boldness to her, but yet she's still vulnerable. And as she meets Elend, and this is a good writing for a female character, because she's not written like a man. She's still a female character. She can maybe like brutally kill a room of men, but she's not. She's not written like a man. She likes, when she's introduced to the world of nobles and she's impersonating a noble, that leaves an impression on her where she
kind of likes the experience.
Likes the experience, and she has to struggle with it. Like I like this. These people are the enemy.
I shouldn't like this. Yeah, these are the noblemen.
Yeah,
right. There's a lot there. I think that she is a pretty well developed character. I think my favorite is Sazed. I think he is the most developed. I think he's the most interesting of all the characters, even compared to her. And I'm not even talking about his journey in the 3rd book. I'm talking about his entire journey throughout the whole thing. I think he's the most interesting.
Even when you go in, because he's the link that's in every book.
He is, and he's fascinating. So. I love Sazed as a character. Ellen, to me, feels a little bit like a cheap romance novel boyfriend that's very idealistic, which is fine. You should be idealistic, and he has good ideals, and he's set up to be that from the beginning with his friends. But I always felt like I would read about him and I would see a body walking with Vin, but there would just be no face. It was just like an empty person more.
I guess if that is the critique, the thing that doesn't connect in the book, or it's all good, but like a weakness of the book is Elend is kind of a weak character, and then when all of a sudden he becomes a Mistborn because of the bead that he ate or whatever,
Right.
it seems like, oh, we lost Kelsier in the first book, but we need someone with that masculine dynamic type of character, so we're going to turn Elend into one. That's what it almost felt like to me when by the time you get to the third book,
I think maybe he was just trying to avoid some conflict that would have been unnecessary for the story, maybe.
And
Between
then
him,
you get into a Superman type complex where he becomes the Lois Lane and she's the Superman, and to avoid that, make him a Mistborn.
And I think he's self-aware of Elend being not a very strong character because he brings in what is
Tyndale.
Tyndale, yeah.
Tyndale, who actually is talk about Sazed.
Yeah.
Is a good character
Oh,
to make
gosh.
Sazed even to, and you Sazed, the things that have happened to that guy and everything like that, and he oh man, it's just that's one of those stories. All the characters though, I love them all.
There's some fun characters in the crew, I guess you could call it overall.
Yeah, the crew, because that's even what they call it in the book.
Yeah.
It's
They're not
crew.
always the most developed, but it's interesting. And you're kind of thrown off with what's his name, the one that's kind of the street talker more. He's like the wuzzing or what? Yeah, what's his name?
Spook.
Yeah, Spook.
Master Bonus or
You
whatever his
almost
name
are
is.
kind of going on the lines of, oh, maybe he's the hero of ages. That maybe he's the real hero of ages because he starts to get these powers. But really, you're just introducing
You're
the new
introduced
magic
to
system, right? Yeah.
hemalurgy and getting more of that.
Which is absolutely
understanding that.
fascinating. A really cool way to introduce
Yeah.
you to it.
Oh, and then like you didn't realize that Vin's earring was a hemalurgic
Right.
spike that actually were the voices in her head always ruin, or was she really thinking her brother was saying things, or like was she? Did she feel like she was going?
And it's been there from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's always been there from book one. I love it
man.
so much how all of it ties together so perfectly. Sometimes I will say the book can be a little dull and it can get into some boring points for the 3 books here and there.
That's why you should listen to it.
Yeah, you should listen to it and just get through them when it gets to those points. Whatever you got to do the dishes while you listen to it.
That's what I've. Yeah, that's
I
what
do that sometimes. I do it while I commute.
Mowing the lawn.
But whatever you do, listen to it. I think it's a good listen. I kind of lost my train of thought on this, where I was going, but
Was it with the characters?
maybe
Sazed.
I don't know. But
I don't,
there-
now I've lost my train of thought.
Oh, I guess there's some low points and there's some boring points and there's some lack of character development with a few characters. I think some of it is excellent, and the ones he really focused on were developed just outstanding. But the 3 books together are cohesive. He knows what he's doing from the beginning. He knows what he's doing in the first, second, and third books, and he's bringing it into a cohesive whole at the end. And the way that it all comes together is just so fascinating and so well thought out and so well put together that these details from the first book are coming together in the overall climax of the entire series. It's absolutely breathtaking when you're experiencing that third book. If you can get through the other books, not to say they're boring, they're fun and they're exciting. Each book has their own plot and their own thing that they're trying to accomplish. But I will say that overall climax of the third book, that those revelations, those coming together of all the little details, that's what makes it worth it to read, I think. Just for that moment. It's worth it to read books 1, 2, and most of 3, just to have that experience at the end of book 3.
So, the final empire, The Well of Ascension, and Hero of Ages, in that order.
Correct.
Read those books. If you want to get into that Alloy of Law, and the Wax and Wayne series, I would recommend those. I love them, but I just think that the setting is a setting that I've been thinking about a lot lately, like over the past few years, and it actually scratched a niche for me. So and that's what I was introduced to, and they're good too. I love Wax and Wayne, the dynamic between the two.
They're fun. I could see you really liking those characters, and they are enjoyable to read and listen to and that sort of thing. Yeah. One thing I got to say about Brandon Sanderson, I've watched some of his lectures. So he teaches at BYU a creative writing class about science fiction writing. I've listened to some of his lectures, and from what it sounds like to me, he is a collaborative writer. This kind of takes it back to what I was saying with Lucasfilm, how there needs to be more collaboration. And I think when you have someone from the outside poking holes in what you're doing and making...
He's a big fan of writing groups.
He's a big fan of writing groups.
You have a group of people read your stuff, and you read their stuff, and you give input on everyone in a collaborative sense.
Right. And you take that input, and you're open to it, and you're willing to make changes, and hopefully you're self-aware enough that you can do that. Yeah. I think Star Wars needs to do a little bit more of that, but you could tell he does this because his books are very well thought out, and you could tell. I mean, he's a smart guy to begin with.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question, Brett. Do you think this is something that could possibly be adapted into a movie or TV?
I believe DMG Entertainment is who currently has adaptation rights because he sold them to one group, it expired, then another. So there are rights in hands of an entertainment thing to make.
They're optioned, right?
They're optioned there. But I think the best, a movie could be cool, and there could be some cool stuff. It's difficult. It's one of those things where when they adapt it, it could be really awesome, but the book experience is its own thing, and the movie experience is going to have to be its own thing.
I agree.
Kind of separate, and because you can't get the same
They're way too in-depth books.
And I would like to see a TV series, actually.
Yeah, I
mean,
think if you're going to do it.
If they can make the Game of Thrones TV series and have that be as successful it is, can't they do something like that with the Mistborn series?
Yeah, I think if you were going to adapt the Mistborn series, I think you would have to go that route. Making a movie would just feel so incomplete.
And I think that's probably what's going to happen. Now, when you jump to like the book The Alloy of Law, that could be made
that could be a movie. Yeah,
that
it's
could be
a simple
adapted.
story.
It's a simple story. You could have some flashbacks to what the TV series for Mistborn would be, and then just make Alloy of Law movies. Those don't need to necessarily be a TV series.
Correct. And I almost think that the Mistborn books, the best way to experience is through book medium, audiobook or reading the book.
Well, and that's what it is. It's that's the material that it is. Any movie that gets made is an adaptation, and it's not the original source of the story.
And we've talked about this. What I would love to see is, I know he's got a 36-book arc planned for this universe of his world. I would love to
die
see
before it gets.
Yeah, I would love to see him expand it to maybe a 39 book, but instead of books, we create the original source material as a TV show. Or something along those lines, a movie or a TV show. So the original source material is that, right? So the original source material is a TV show or a movie. I don't think adapting these is going to work very well for the screen. I'm not saying that it can't be done, because it could.
And I think it will be at some point.
Probably, once it gets to be a little bit more mainstream. I mean, it is pretty well heard of, but it's not to the level that maybe something like Game of Thrones is. But I think an adaptation will happen. But what I would love to see is just an original story in this universe where we can experience the different magic systems on the big screen, but just be its own thing. Just be the original story, having that in the medium. Because it's a big enough, rich enough universe, you could easily do that. Just like the Harry Potter books, they were fine adaptations, but the books were special. I love that she's doing Fantastic Beasts as movies, because then you could see her thought process in the original movie form.
It's better for those movies that they don't have to be adapted.
Right.
That it is that
That's
the story
she's
is
telling. She's not leaving
realized.
out details. She's not, you don't have to pick and choose what you include. You don't have to condense and all that. She's just saying, this is the story I want to tell over 5 movies, and it's for the big screen, so I know that. So the things I need to include here, I know I have to put in the movie.
The only thing they have to keep the only thing they have to do in those films is they have to keep to this like a certain tone and aesthetic and design from the previous Harry Potter movies.
I agree.
Which is actually supports it marketing wise and everything, makes these movies more successful, and the studio loves it.
And she has the same director of the last, I think, 4 films.
David Yates.
David Yates, yeah. And he does a pretty good job. He's not like Alfonso Cuarón, who did the third one, who was more of an artistic filmmaker. He also did Gravity, by the way, which was an interesting film.
No, I've actually never read Prisoner of Azkaban, but I saw the movie and I love the movie.
I can't do this right now.
I know that people are like, for whatever, that's a controversial movie. But that was the major tone shift and design shift in that too.
Controversy is a good thing, though.
And it was I thought it was a good movie. I really liked.
As a movie, it's an excellent adaptation.
Yeah.
You can't put everything from the book in there. It's a bigger book, It's when things start to get a little bit darker in the series. I think Chris Columbus was a good director for books 1 and 2.
That's the interesting thing. You jump into that one, and all of a sudden Hogwarts looks totally different.
It does.
Hagrid's house is in a new location. Well, what's going on? But actually, it's like, oh, this looks like the way it really would have been in the books. Because the first 2 movies, for better or worse,
they're very sunny, which I liked.
Yeah.
I liked the appearance of the first 2 movies.
Well,
I didn't like the childless nature of them as much.
well, the sunny stuff was nice because by the time you get to like the Half-Blood Prince, all of a sudden you're like, where's the color?
Yeah.
Because you're like, every scene is tinted so much in post-production, it seems like.
They have a very specific color grading that they go for, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mistborn.
Mistborn.
I don't know how we got on. Oh, just the adaptation idea. I think it'd be fun if Brandon Sanderson took that approach. Instead of adapting his books, if he just wrote something original in this universe for the big screen or the small screen.
To have him, I would enjoy that a lot. In fact, anything that comes out, I'm going to go see. I just wonder how a gory hemalurgy would be on screen.
Oh man, the thing is, these books are gory, and they're gruesome at times.
Yeah,
especially when Vin's fighting, or you have some like heads exploding on her, and all sorts.
When
of
she like does the headbutt into a guy and his skull cracks or something like that,
it explodes. It's out of control, and it's so crazy. And it would be I think it would be a rated R story. You wouldn't have to make it rated R.
Well, the interesting thing for those who worry about content is language-wise and theme-wise, there's very little what people would call offensive. It's mostly just violent
There's
situations.
some Bible swears in there, which is about it. I call them Bible swears, right?
The hells and damns.
Yeah.
I said it. Does that remove our clean thing? But
yeah, this is mature content, everyone.
As mature as we get on this.
But yeah, that's what he put in there. It's not a big deal, but as far as gore and gruesomeness and bloodiness, it does get there. It has some moments for sure that are pretty.
The Koloss, just the like the skin stretching, and then like the Inquisitors with the spikes in them and things like that. It's just but the book's interesting because you imagine it the way, and the thing the magic of books are that you take your experience into the story because you imagine what you imagine. Mm-hmm. So like people like reading Lord of the Rings, they thought the movies were like super dark because when they read the books, they maybe didn't have that dark perspective. It was more sunny in their mind,
mm-hmm.
more of a Disney style fantasy rather than a gritty style fantasy. I don't know the words I'm trying to say there, but you understand.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
All right, so
but
final thoughts on that?
What would you rate it?
What do I rate it? The
Yeah.
book?
Yeah, what would you rate the books overall, as not just individually, but overall as a cohesive whole?
Now, I like to do star ratings, and I'm going to say that books for stars on this is like out of 5, 4.5. I think that the Ellen situation is kind of lacking, and then when you transition from the one series into the new series, I don't know if people necessarily like that. I'm fine with it, and I want to see modern, like I think he plans more of a late 20th century version and a space version.
The 1980s, yeah.
Yeah, so there's other settings with these powers in them. Space will be interesting if he gets around to doing that, because ferrochemy and allomancy, I think. Well, actually, if you read the latest book of the Wax and Wayne series, which the name escapes me, you get introductions to technology and magic that would provide space travel within his magic system. Now that's a big spoiler, but it's not necessarily, if you read it, you'll just see connections.
Right.
But think about, like, if you can do speed bubbles.
Yeah.
If you're the kind of person who does the opposite of Wayne, like Marcy, then you could get to places what would be seemingly fast, but huge distances of time. But it would feel short, kind of a thing. Take all this time, but then so things are going rapidly behind you as you go through space, and then when you get to the planet, you're not super old. Of course, everybody is dead and gone by then.
Right.
But I just thoughts like that.
Interesting, yeah.
That's not explained. That's just the thought.
Some interesting concepts. So 4.5 stars. That's good. I would give it an A-. I do grade ratings A-, and for the same reason, mostly Ellen. He's a little bit of a dull character, and there's some other character development issues, and there's a few dull moments throughout the books where it's a little bit draggy. But overall, absolutely fantastic. And any of those issues of character development or slow moments, it all pales in comparison to that climax that you have at the end of the third book, where it all comes together beautifully. And you're wondering through the whole third book, like, how is this going to come together? Who's really the hero of ages? Is it Vin? Is it Spook? Who is it? Because Kelsier's working with Spook.
And what's the name of the Conjure? Tensoon, or I get
Tensoon, yeah.
Tensoon.
That's the original one.
The original one. What was the
I don't know
name of this?
I don't remember.
Why does it take? Why do I remember Tensoon? And Tensoon's really like, once you switch gears and you realize it's the other Conjure.
Tensoon is really a creepy name to me for some reason.
Oh, but that character was interesting.
Yeah.
And then you get introduced to the Conjure, and you feel like, where does this world end?
It doesn't.
It
That's
doesn't.
the thing. But it all comes together too, which is great. So, if for some reason you're still listening to this, you haven't read the books, go read them. They're fascinating. Listen to them if you must, but they are worth the ride, and it's a great ride. There's some lows, but the highs are higher than high. And it's great. So, check Mistborn out. Let us know what you think about Mistborn, adaptations, anything that we've talked about. Tell us how you think we sound. Tell us what you don't like about us. At this point, we're developing thick skin, I think. Although no one's ever actually said anything to us except my wife. She makes me get thick skin. That's hilarious.
So, check us out on Facebook. Geek Nerd Tangent is facebook.com/Geek Nerd Tangent, and at Geek Nerd Tangent pretty much
for Twitter and Instagram.
Email us. Give us a call. 801-769-6668.
You got it.
I got the number that time.
And the email is geeknerdtangent@gmail.com.
And you can even text that number, but let us know who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear from you.
And we'll play it on the show. Thanks. We'll catch you later.
Sounds good. See you guys.